As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is focused on keeping our loons in top condition. And with expertise in orthopedics, sports medicine, heart care, and more, Allina has the team to keep your family in the game too. The experts at Allina Health take the time to get to know you as a whole person, helping you achieve wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. It's an altogether better kind of healthcare. Learn more at allinahealth.org. All right, everybody, welcome to Sound of the Loons week. I don't know. I think it's August 29th today. I have to take a look at my calendar, make sure what day of the week it is, what week it's in, month, and just figure out exactly where we're at because it's kind of where the summer has gone. So today I get to be joined by Amos Magee. And, I kind of oftentimes intro Manny Lagos as like Mr. Soccer Minnesota, but I feel like you could be right in that same category as far as what you've contributed, Amos, to the soccer community in the state of Minnesota. Would you qualify yourself right up there? I mean, you've been around a long time.
Gray hairs, wrinkles, and age does not make you a Mr. Soccer of Minnesota. It simply means that you spent enough time getting to know people and working with boys and girls, men and women in this community to really appreciate the work that goes into soccer in Minnesota and the people who have contributed towards it. And now I'm in a position where, I get to spend more time with those people and show my appreciation in different ways. So it's been enjoyable.
Am I correct in saying it's the president of youth development for Minnesota United? Is that the correct terminology now?
Vice president. Let's not get ahead.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Vice president. Vice president of president or vice president.
Need congressional approval to get to be a full president.
Well, you spent enough time in DC. You know how that process works.
Yes. Yep. And that's why I moved away. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I get it. But in all seriousness, I know when we talked to you, when you were named to this role, you were really excited about this opportunity to be a part of sort of this youth movement, and not just from a soccer perspective, but community and getting people to love the game and getting kids to love the game. And even if they don't end up professional, just wanting to continue to grow this game and have people love it. Now that you're a bit in it, where do you feel like you're at? What kind of progress, what kind of challenges, what has like really been like, wow, that was, and I might've asked you this before too, but like sort of an aha moment where you're just like, this is why I do what I do when I show up on the hard days. Cause not every day is easy.
No, it's not. But I mean, what the aha moment is that this is such an incremental, incrementally moving forward job, which is to say that, you're just trying to move all the pieces along little by little. We talk a lot about how development of our players is not linear, and the development of the academy isn't either. And, frankly, the development of our entire football club isn't as well. We take steps forward in a positive way, feel good about it, and then sort of take a side step or a half step backwards as we try to adjust to a different sort of, force of nature or a different set of stimuli. And then we got to move forward in a different way with different people. And so, in that sense, it is really rewarding because every day presents a different challenge. The focus of trying to individually develop players within the context of moving the entire academy program forward within the greater within the greater context of trying to move the club forward, wrap that up in a bun of Minnesota soccer and really trying to be a leading force and a beacon of soccer in Minnesota. And you can imagine the complexity of it all is exciting, rewarding, frustrating. But what that allows you to do is to enjoy your victories, to kind of get rejuvenated for the next challenge ahead, to appreciate the work being done by an individual coach and Cambridge Asante versus the work that Adrian and, and Cam are doing with professional players. So I don't know if that was an answer. That is simply the way I think about it, which is we're all trying to make incremental incremental steps forward, which we think will inevitably, affect the greater whole of soccer in Minnesota.
I hate to break it to you, but you got one major thing wrong there. It's not in a bun. It should be like in a hot dish.
Yeah, that's true. It should be fried on a stick. This is state fair
exactly.
time.
Have you made it to the state fair yet? I mean, come on.
Yep.
Please tell me you've made it to the fair and you've seen the largest pig or whatever.
That is a staple in the Tuttle Magee family. Yes.
Oh, sure. Good. It's good to know. It's good to know. I have to drag Bobby to it. And it's oftentimes he doesn't end up going, or if he does, it has to be like for a work outing or something, but it's not his thing. Whereas like, since we moved home, I'm like, I got to get to the state fair once for just a couple hours, like
right.
You got to do it. So, but yeah, I prefer hot dish over in a bun, just because that's also a Minnesota staple. But when you look at MLS Next and what the season looked like, I know it wrapped up in July, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead because we didn't even hit on the 15s, 17s, and 19s and sort of the youth movement. What did you see from the MLS Next this season that really was like, that was a couple steps forward? We interviewed a lot of players during the season. We talked to Cam, second year of that team. What did you see from that group? And then also, how do you see the younger academy kids contributing to that going forward, and hopefully in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah. So, MLS Next Pro in its second year is already far ahead of where I think it was last year. Cam's got a better group this year, more exciting younger players, some really quality, experienced older players to help lead the way, positive contributions for first team players that are coming to play with Minnesota United too. So that, I think that is taken natural steps forward. MLS Next as a youth, as a national youth league, again, this was my first year experiencing it, rolling up my sleeves and getting in the middle of it. I'm really impressed. I'm impressed with the quality of coaching, certainly in our academy and other academies we compete against. The level of player is, as far surpasses when you and I, Kyndra, were playing youth soccer. The level of events, the way they put on events, all of it it's real. It is exciting. It's an exciting platform for players to compete at and to develop in. And what that's done here in Minnesota is it's really allowed us to vet players in our academy, really challenge them both competitively, developmentally, and as normally happens, some cream rises to the top, and at that point we skim that off and push them on up to Cam and see how they do there. And with almost no exception, they've swum when they've been put into the MLS Next Pro pool of Minnesota United too. So our academy kids are going up there, they're competing well, they're training well, they're adding to the quality of training. Cam trusts them because they prove themselves trustworthy every day. A lot of them have played important minutes for a team that is on the verge of I think a point out of a playoff spot going into the last month of the season. So that has been a really, really nice club build as we've envisioned that when we added the second team. Certainly I envisioned that when I came to work in the academy in this space, and that's a full credit to the players and the coaches and the staff of both the first team and the second team and the academy. All three staffs are working hard at trying to provide a pro player pathway and move Minnesota kids along that.
With the younger age groups, with the 15s and the 17s in particular, because 19s is kind of a weird spot sometimes with that age group where they may be out of high school, but college, it's kind of a funky age group. But with the 15s and the 17s, how do you feel like that has gone in the state of Minnesota? Because that's a relatively new thing here, the Minnesota United Academy. Going back to our youth days, holy smokes, I can't keep track of all the different things. The ECNL versus the MPL, there's this, and there's like MYSA, but then there's I cannot keep track listening to all my sister and brother-in-laws talk about it. So how do you feel like Minnesota United academies 15s and 17s in particular, whatever age group you guys are looking to expand to, has done and grown, and the process of getting the word out there and the benefits of kids going to that program and maybe leaving whatever current club and high level club that they're at. How do you see that going so far?
I mean, there's a couple things to think about it. One, I think anecdotally, observationally, and probably metric wise, MLS Next is on the boys' side, the highest level of youth soccer in our country. So for the top kids in Minnesota, naturally, I think they're there. They're some of the top kids because they're competitive, they're driven, they would want to play on the top level. So we certainly provide that platform for them. But we are reliant right now, but for touchstone programming where we're able to, with a lot of ID and discovery events, figure out who some of the top younger players coming through are, get a little chance to work with them, get a sense of their work habits, their coachability, all those different pieces, what they're like as kids. We are reliant on a lot of really good people doing a lot of really good work in our community. I'm asked about youth soccer in Minnesota all the time, and we certainly have a lot of work to do as a state. But I am struck continually by people who are doing really good work with sometimes restrictive resources, players, fields, indoor time, outdoor time. All of those pieces are real challenges that are unique to Minnesota. We have to get better here. A lot of the metrics talk about how our state is behind other states of similar size. So in Minnesota, with Minnesota United, we feel like we've got to take some leadership in really pushing forward how we develop players in this state, and inevitably in this country. So I'm really pleased with again, a lot of good people doing good work here, with the understanding that there's still more good work to do, and we've got to help provide support, resources, and guide, leadership to guide all of us to those better places.
Speaking of support and partnerships and leaderships, and you have this cooperative that you sort of joined with Spring Lake Park on, and even the homestay program that you guys are sort of implementing, how do those things help you get the best players to come here, to be a part of this, to join this? And even because, I mean, how much at the age groups you're working with too, is it about ensuring the parents that this is the right choice for their child to enter into this kind of a commitment, and maybe with that homestay program specifically, and then the cooperative with Spring Lake?
Yeah, sure. So we did, let me just go back and say that previously we've trained our 15s, 17s, and 19s after school, sort of basically the same time. That limits our staff resources, it limits field time. So it was an imperfect solution. So one of the first things I did was I really wanted us to look at training times and how we could maximize our resources. Again, as I addressed previously, Minnesota is limited, and it's a unique situation based on having to spend 4 or 5 months indoors. And so we looked at it and decided as a staff that if we could train them at 3 separate times, we could get the 19s, which is essentially the third team in our club, get them along a similar professional schedule to the first team and the second team. That would allow interchangeability, and flow from 19s to second team to first team, and vice versa. So we thought that was really important. Our 17s, to get them to train from 2 to 4 as opposed to 4 to 6, allows them full field, and same with our 15s going 4 to 6 after school. So you look at that, and I did not want our kids, I'm a son of educators. I did not think that as we look at the overall holistic development of kids in our academy, didn't want them to go and just sit in a classroom, do all online school with a tutor that comes in and occasionally helps them. I wanted for our kids more emotional, social development. I wanted them to be in an environment where they're meeting people, different genders, meeting people outside of soccer, meeting people that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever it might be. I thought that was really important to the growth and development of our players. So Spring Lake Park is a very innovative, smaller school district that we met with the superintendent and eventually the director of curriculum at the high school, and we were blown away by their ability to be nimble and to be creative. And so as we shifted over this schedule to training time to better benefit our players, to be able to spend more time individually with them, to be able to build out on what we're trying to do, I didn't think it was fair for us to do that and say to our families, to our academy families, fend for yourself, just make sure you get our kid here. We had to provide what we thought was a proper solution or a good solution for them should they choose to utilize it. Spring Lake Park has a great open enrollment program. So we provided, there are counselors at Spring Lake Park High School is providing for us. There's counseling, and there's like I said, the director of curriculum who's fantastic, who's able to help us navigate our kids should they choose to enroll in Spring Lake Park, that allows them to do some online, some bricks and mortar in-person school, some hybrid pieces, with proper guidance and counsel from the school and the school district. So overall, we think it's really allowed our academy to grow on the field while not limiting what they can do off the field and how they're going to grow and develop as kids. So I think
Can I just say quick too, before we move on to the homestay thing, like I just can't believe like how refreshing is it too, and nice to have a school district like Spring Lake Park that is willing to be nimble and work with you, because oftentimes it's just not the case anymore. And then also like that's got to be somewhat of a recruiting tool, knowing for these families and these kids that you have gone this extra mile to provide this and make sure that this is still their opportunity, and not just focusing on the soccer perspective and kind of it being all encompassing as we see kids bounce around the United States at younger age groups to join different academies. And sometimes they'll have been in 3 different academies by the time they get to the first team somewhere. So how important do you think that could be for you guys going forward in that aspect? And then second of all, just like refreshing that there's people that are willing to work together on that and be nimble and sort of come together on something like that.
No, for sure. It is really important. We've had a lot of people, a lot of families that we've talked to that are outside the metro area, who the idea of being able to have their kid come here and play for academy, but not go fully online, it's a huge plus. So yes, recruiting, I think it helps. What I've come to learn, Kyndra, is, I'm daily impressed with Spring Lake Park and the people that are involved at the high school and on the district level. But there are other school districts that are also trying to be nimble. Post-COVID has changed the face of, I think, how we think about education. So we have a lot of kids that go to their school district and go to their high schools and say, hey, this is what's going on. Can you help me solve it? And a lot of these high schools are able to figure that out. So, look, public education can be much maligned or much celebrated. It's obviously a little bit of both, or a lot of celebration and some. I'm not going to get on a political side here. What I can say is, when I go back to talking about good people doing good work, again, we live it every day with Spring Lake Park and some of the other school districts, which are helping their kids make it work coming into our academy.
So then how does that transition to the homestay aspect? And is that something that is new for you guys as we talk about the cooperation with Spring Lake Park, but how does the homestay situation and program help you guys? And what does that look like for you moving forward? And how do families even do it? Like if they want to find more information about these things, how does that come about?
Well, there's a couple different pieces. One, for Minnesota families that are applying to be a host family, there's a sense that Minnesota United has their ducks in a row when it comes to looking after the education. If a kid is, if we have a host family that's in Hopkins, they don't need to go in and try to sort out a specific schedule with the Hopkins public schools. We're going to do that at Spring Lake Park, and we've just got to figure out how to get them from their house to Spring Lake Park High School, or to our training facility if they're on the 19th. So that's a big piece. for our host families, but more for the kids who are coming in from out of market. You know, we can put them on a Zoom call with Spring Lake Park High School, with the assistant principal, with the curriculum director, with guidance counselors, and they know that, you know, that their son is going to be looked after academically, and it doesn't have to be a step back academically to take a step forward soccer. It can be a step forward soccer and a step forward academically. And then we believe also with the bricks and mortar piece, with the in-person piece, that can be a step forward, you know, socially as well.
And then just lastly for you, now that you're in this role, and I don't know if it's how you feel about, you know, do you ever wish that you were like back on, do you ever wish you were coaching? Do you ever wish you were like in the thick of it and on the field doing training sessions, even the academy level? And correct me if I'm wrong, if you're already filling in, you know, like, hey, so-and-so's out sick today. Amos, you're in charge of the 15s. You got to come up with a training session and go out and put the cones out there and figure it all out. Like, do you miss that? Do you do that ever? I mean, you just coaching your daughter. You were coaching your daughter for a bit, I think.
Yeah, I've been coaching all 3 daughters.
Okay.
But, yeah, that's been an absolute blast. It's a little bit of a different level than than what we're doing up here. I have been able to jump on the field a little bit. That has been enjoyable. One of the things I'm reminded about every time I do is, one, the level of player is, you know, as far superior to when I was coaching regularly at a youth level. And the other piece that I am struck by is, you know, the level and quality of the coaches that we have in our academy. They are very detailed. They spend a lot of time thinking about how to get the most out of the entire team, but also the individual. So within that context, you know, I'm reminded when I get on the field of what good hands our academy players are in with our staff. You know, as much as you know, it's enjoyable for me to work with them and to, you know, go over concepts and ideas and principles that are, I think, you know, really beneficial to players developing and growing as soccer players.
So you don't throw the boots on, and there's no like staff game. I mean, have I missed this to just come up and watch and observe alumni game? Like, what
There could be all of that. I would last Kyndra about 7 minutes before my calf, hamstring, and or quad would go. It'd be a magical 7 minutes, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah, I bet. I can't imagine that Ben Grossman hasn't thrown something together up there yet, because I saw him playing some staff, some, you know, broadcaster games in Australia there.
That's
and that was a high quality competition. I noticed I wasn't invited to any of those, but that's okay. I don't need to make I didn't need to go up against Carly Lloyd.
They're lost. I'll just tell you that if Ben Grossman comes up here, I'll have Adi man mark him. So
that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like your chances too. No offense, Ben. I like your chances. Well, Amos, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a million things going on, so I always appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to see the growth of the academy and the youth players, and right up to MLS next and all the things you guys have going on. So I just appreciate your devotion to youth soccer in the state of Minnesota, because I know it's, as we said, it's not always easy, and it's incremental movements, and maybe sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or whatever it might be. But those positive, like, light bulb moments are always fun to see, and see how well these guys do, and like the, you know, the tournaments and GA and everything else, and hearing about their trip to Florida this last year for the GA from Noel. I just think all these things, like, these are moments, I think, that are like, okay, yes, this is why I get up and do the grind on the days that it feels like a grind. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's like I said, there's a lot of good people in Minnesota trying to improve our state soccer wise, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So yeah. Awesome.
Thanks, Amos. Have a great rest of your whatever day it is, Tuesday, and we'll see you around. I don't need that. Yeah. I had to look at my calendar. Thanks, Bye-bye. Amos. All right, everybody, stay tuned. Segment number 2 coming up with Andy Greder on the backside of this commercial break. Thank you. Looking for a way to get closer to your club? For just $25, Loons fans can join the Preserve, Minnesota United's official season ticket waitlist. Waiting usually isn't fun, but this waitlist comes with benefits. Being a member of the Preserve gives you early access to MNUFC single game tickets, partial season plans, and group tickets, as well as special pre-sales for other marquee events that come to Allianz Field. Visit MNUFC.com/preserve to join. Hello, everybody, and welcome back for segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons. This week, we are doing a Tuesday podcast. We know Minnesota United has a crazy week with another midweek game on Wednesday, and then they're on the road on Saturday to San Jose, as we kind of discussed earlier in the podcast as well. And we also know our next guest is extremely busy, not just with Minnesota United, but also with the University of Minnesota and the Golden Gophers football. Andy Greder, the National Sports Media Association Sports Writer of the Year. Does that, like, how long does that continue on until the next one gets handed over, or what?
Well, just to clarify, they give them out in each state. So
either way,
I'm not the national, I'm the Minnesota sports writer of the year.
I'm going to go with it. Just take it. Just go with it. And so, and even in the state of Minnesota, there are a lot of sports in this state and a lot of writers in this state. So you just grasp that and run with it. Don't hide from the fact that you put in your time.
Well, thanks, Kyndra. I appreciate that. Sorry, I had to let facts get in the way, but yeah, no, it's a cool honor to be selected by my peers, among my peers for this. So yeah, me and Patrick Royce at the Star Tribune shared this year's honor from something called the National Sports Media Association. So it's a cool thing, and got to present Patrick with his award because he didn't make it to the banquet in North Carolina in June. So I got to hang out with that crotchety old man, the legend in the business that is Patrick Royce.
I was just going to say, there's no age limit on these things. No, I'm just kidding. Patrick Royce, you said it. He is like, he's a little bit timeless and he's a little bit traditional, which is what makes him so great in this time where media and reporting and journalism and everything has changed so much. He has survived and advanced every step of the way, not just survived and advanced, but thrived. So I know you can appreciate people like that have been around a long time. And I appreciate that you get recognized for all the hard work you put in, because oftentimes, you do what you do every day, and you're not expecting recognition, right? That's not why you do what you do. But when it happens, it's kind of nice, right? To know that your hard work pays off.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to know that. Yeah, absolutely. I think, the thing that I like to point out is, at the Pioneer Press, we've got a short staff, and there's 5 or 6 of us, and all of us are covering multiple things within the same time frame. So I was lucky enough to get it, but there's a lot of teammates that I have at the Pioneer Press that deserve it just the same.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you. I know we do, especially at Minnesota United. And I know in the past 6 years when I was there, and in the beginning with soccer, it's hard to find beat reporters for that sport because it wasn't necessarily top of everybody's radar, even as popular as soccer has been in Minnesota for so long. As you stated, we have every major sport, college and professional, in the Twin Cities area, let alone the broader Minnesota. So the fact that you devote a massive chunk of your time to, I know that they appreciate it as well. And I want to kind of dive into that because you have been around since Minnesota United went to MLS, and you've seen the growth of this team and the ups and downs of this team and some of the challenges and the highs and the lows and acquisitions and signings and transfers and everything else in between. If you looked at 2023, and I'm sure you have done interviews and podcasts yourself because you go on as guests oftentimes, where did you think Minnesota would be at this point this season? How are they in relation to what you thought they would be? And how do you see them finishing now with some of the midseason acquisitions? I know that's a lot in one question, but sort of to lump in 2023.
Yeah, I think when you look at the fact that, Emmanuel Reynoso missed, over 40% of the season, I think that was always something that was such an unknown to start the year that, with him back now, I think the expectations change, right? Knowing that you have such a difference maker. Obviously the baseline is to make the playoffs, and they're kind of right at the playoff line. So I think that, they're kind of right where the base minimum of what they need to be is. I think that, you're kind of always looking for more with this team, to be honest, right? You're always trying to see what the next gear is, right? Even on Sunday against Seattle, you're trying to see if they're able to break through and score the winner. And it just feels like there's there's a governor on this team for whatever reason that they just can't find that extra thing to push on. I think when you sign a player like Teemu Pukki, you expect the level to raise, you expect the goals to come. And I think that's been, a bit of a surprising thing to see him on a 680-minute goalless drought. I don't think people expected that. So I think they're kind of in striking distance. They've got 10 games left. There's a lot of season left to be played, and their goals are all still right in front of them. But to this point, it's kind of been in that slightly above average range where they have been for a number of years now.
And it's crazy because to your point about Emmanuel Reynoso, I think everybody felt the same way, is what is his team going to look like without him when he was gone in the beginning. But then actually they started off really well. And I think part of that was, and this is just my own personal opinion, the team wanting to do well in spite of his absence, because everybody was asking about, when is Emmanuel Reynoso? How are you going to survive?
Mm-hmm.
He's your number 10. Your team is built around this guy, which most teams are built around their number 10s. That's not like something unusual or crazy. Yeah. But they almost did it in spite of him. And then you also lose Robin Lod, which I think was a massive blow to this team, not just because of his abilities, but just what. And so it was like this weird double whammy. You got Reynoso back, Robin Lod goes out with an injury, and just what he brings from a consistency standpoint. So then the team gets Reynoso back, and then you're kind of like, okay, now we should be flying here. Even with the absence of Robin, there should be some acceleration, some liftoff here. Mm-hmm. And this team is, again, last year was sitting in 4th position much of the season. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year, you're like scrambling to get the points at the last minute to, all of a sudden decision day is super meaningful, and you're watching other results and you're trying to find a way into the postseason, which they did 4 years in a row, which no one in this current climate in the Western Conference had done. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you in that this team just feels like there's something more to be had, but how does it cross over that line where the standard and the expectation isn't to make the playoffs? The standard is to host a game and then go farther into the playoffs and be real confident and successful in those moments. So to your point about Teemu Pukki, you're there every day or just about at training. What have you seen from him? What's the energy? What's the vibe? Because we also know with goal scorers, when they're not scoring, he's a seasoned veteran, but it doesn't mean you can't get frustrated, and it builds and you push and you force it. We saw it with Luis Maria. What do you see from him day in and day out?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times just during games, you see him make runs and they're kind of fruitless, right? He doesn't get the service that I think he's looking for. I think there's a lot of times where he's kind of putting his arms up or looking at teammates and either wanting to pass earlier or even at all. And I think, I don't feel like there's been that connection, right? Obviously, him and Reynoso connected on an amazing goal on July 12th. And it was kind of like, wow, there is the lightning in the bottle that these two guys can have together. But it was just that, and it was then gone. And I think we've always kind of been waiting for that. I think it's been really difficult because he's obviously fighting himself now. Obviously, he expects to have scored multiple goals by this time and not be stuck on one. So he knows it. You can sense that he's getting frustrated. You can sense that he expects more out of himself, and the fans expect more out of him. So I think Adrian is trying to be positive, right? That's what he said on Sunday, to just kind of find ways to enjoy your football, right? Even if the goals aren't coming, even if you're questioning yourself, to enjoy what you're doing out there. I think what's interesting is that, we don't see a whole lot in training, and he's not always kind of involved in some of the after effects, right? The kind of finishing drills at the end. And he takes
Does that surprise you?
It kind of does, because I'd imagine that he would be, kind of front and center in those things. And often once the session's over, he's done as well. I think, it was curious because obviously at Norwich, you saw the goal production dip off in his last year at Norwich in the championship. And I think that was a bit concerning to see that the production wasn't at the same level it was in those first 2 years of the championship. And Adrian Heath and Mark Watson were, outwardly very confident that there was going to be no drop off when he was here. And certainly there has been, and they billed him as the biggest signing in club history. And I would contend that Reynoso was, obviously, given the transfer fee, given the pedigree, given the weight, given the age, given the dynamism that we see on the field. But it was obviously a very big signing, and he's got a very big wage bill, even if he came in on a free transfer. So Yeah, I mean, everyone's looking for more from him. And I think it starts with him, and Adrian is still confident, still says he's confident that the goals will come. And that, even if he wishes that he would have 5 or 6 or 7 at this point, that in these next 10 games, maybe he can still get 5 or 6 more. So there's still hope, but you're still kind of waiting to see him do more and create more. And I think that everyone's just kind of left wanting more.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of times it feels like with those kind of players, it's just the quality and the finishing. They don't need 15 chances in a
Yeah.
game and they miss him wide and this and that and the other. But the problem is right now he's not even getting the chances.
Yeah.
So if you can even get him the chance, he's so clinical that he will just find a way to pass it into the corner. Like he's not going to try to do too much. He's not going to try to overpower it. He just, if you give him the opportunity, he will likely put it away. And it kind of sounds like he's just not getting the opportunities in the moments. And yeah, as a goal scorer, that just builds. So then when you look at this team coming off Leagues Cup, which they had a tremendous run aside from the last game. So it's hard for the last game not to leave this sort of bitter taste in your mouth with the way that ended. But what did you see from the team during Leagues Cup? Anybody in particular step up to you that maybe surprised you? Or was it sort of the same rotation of squad that you're used to seeing in MLS play, but the schedule is just so crazy? And then how do you see them coming out of it? I know it's only been a couple games and a handful of, all of a sudden it's going to be thick and fast, but how did you see them come out of it and have a little bit of a break there?
Yeah, I think it was really Bongi Halangwane's time to shine, right? It was fun to kind of have the golden boot race with him and Messi at the top of it for a while, right? It was fun to kind of have that kind of connection for Minnesota United fans with the greatest player of all time, and Bongi was scoring so many goals and doing it and so dynamically and having such a joy about the way he was doing it, right? I think he brings such excitement and love for the sport, and fans really embrace that about him. So he was really kind of he was already Minnesota's leading scorer in MLS play, and just kind of stacked up, I think, was it 7 goals in leagues play on top of it, right? So it was really kind of his time. And now we're seeing the fact that he's out, right? He took that knock to the knee in the New York City game and left halfway through that, and didn't play in Seattle. And today, on Tuesday, before they play Colorado on Wednesday, he didn't train. It doesn't sound like he's going to be able to play here on Wednesday. So when you lose your leading scorer, a guy who I think we also need to acknowledge the fact that he was finding spaces because of runs that Pukki was making, right? The space that was opening up for him. While Pukki wasn't providing the end product, his threats were kind of creating space and opportunities for Bongi. I think Pukki had an assist in Leagues Cup as well. So there's that fact that it's such a team game, especially in attack, when you try to stretch and combine. And the fact that they don't have Bongi now, and it sounds like it was kind of like, well, we're going to see after New York. We're going to see, maybe give him a couple of days and see if he's ready for Seattle. And then it was, well, maybe we can give him a couple more days and maybe he's ready for Chicago, or excuse me, for Colorado. And I think it's kind of a day-to-day thing. But at this point, he's been missing quite a few training sessions, so he's going to need to build up before he gets back. But he's just been such a key player, and the guy who's been producing the end product that Minnesota United fans have wanted for so long. He's the guy that's been doing it on the right wing. So to not have him, I think you saw that in the Seattle match, right? You didn't have the width, you didn't have the finishing, you didn't have the speed to kind of spring on counterattacks, and he was a player that was certainly missed after really starring in their great Leagues Cup run.
Well, I think it's just, to your point, it's the runs that he makes and how dynamic he is. He really keeps the opposition off balance, because you don't know if he's going to cut inside. You don't know if he's going to go to goal. You don't know if he's going to pass. He's willing to make the runs into wide areas, and get end line. He's willing to track back defensively. And then his finishing has gotten so much better, I think, since his first year. Mm-hmm. I think, when he came on, he was kind of like really forcing it. He was so high energy. And now it's gotten a little bit more measured and balanced in his finishing. And he's just a likable guy. He just has this incredible personality and this great smile and this, to you said, a joy about the game. So going forward, let's say hypothetically he's not available for Colorado and he's not available for San Jose or whatever that might be, because you just never know how these injuries go. I don't know if you remember, but Joao Klaus, got injured in April and was supposed to be out for 2 weeks. And we keep waiting for him to come back. So you just never know with the way these injuries go. And it's not a major injury where they need surgery. It's almost worse because there's such an uncertainty about the comeback from it. So what do you see this team looking like when they don't have him, when you're missing that dynamic piece? How does that void get filled? And then specifically, what do you see in this Colorado game coming up already on Wednesday? And then we'll have to talk about San Jose, because by the time this podcast gets rolled around and wrapped around, we're going to be heading right into the weekend.
Yeah. I'd imagine, I asked Adrian about how they might set up, because without Bongi on Wednesday, and it sounds like it's going to be likely very similar to what they did against Seattle with Joseph Rosales, central midfielder on the left wing, and the Sonny Dotson, a central midfielder on the right wing. And I think that irks fans because they'd like to see players in more natural positions, right? I think Ishmael Tajiri-Sherrati, when he came on in the second half of the Seattle game, kind of had a little bit of a spark to him, right? I think he had one of their best chances in the game. And I think fans are looking for some of that to continue. And it sounds like, Adrian likes what Joseph and Hassani did in wide areas, even if it was maybe not fitting on the right foot. But I'd imagine that it's going to probably stay the same. And I'd imagine that Tajiri-Sherrati comes off the bench on Wednesday. So, I think it's interesting because Franco Fragapane has found himself to be on the outside looking in. He doesn't have a goal here this year. And I asked Adrian a couple of weeks ago about Fraga, and he said, I'm going to pick guys that I feel are the best to win a game. And I think that was telling about where he thinks of Franco Fragapane on the left wing right now. And that's why you see Joseph Rosales in that spot instead. I think Adrian has brought on Sangbin Jong and Mender Garcia, and Mender obviously had the clinching goal in New York. So those are kind of the options that they have in attack. And, Pukki hasn't played, 90 minutes yet. And I think that's interesting because, he's been kind of fighting himself a little bit. And is this an opportunity either on Wednesday or on Saturday to have him come off the bench and mix it up? And maybe he's coming in when a back line is tired, and maybe he can kind of create those spaces and those runs and those back shoulder things to be challenging. I'd imagine that Adrian is going to stick with the same 11 or something very close to it, because that's usually how he operates. He doesn't have a long bench and likes to go with the guys that have brought him here. And I think that'll continue.
And then when you look at just how this Western Conference has sort of shaped up, and we're looking down the stretch run here, I can't believe how few games there are left already. It's like you came out of Leagues Cup and the season's like almost over, because it wasn't legitimately like a halfway point, and just before that you had the All-Star game. So how do you see this Western Conference shaping up? Anything stand out to you as well that's like shocking, good or bad, or what have you seen from this West?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of reiterate that, given the fact that Colorado's in last place, it's just such a vital 3 points midweek game at home, a place that Minnesota has struggled at this year, to really make sure that they get, all 3 points against Colorado, because, you go on the road and play a San Jose team that's solidly in the playoff field. And then from then you don't have kind of these gimme type games. There's a lot of challenging games left on the schedule. I think the Minnesota United is in a pretty decent spot, just given, the problems that Portland has had, right? And firing Gio Savarese and kind of being, buried in 12th a little bit, and kind of having a few more games in Minnesota. Kansas City as well as a couple more games played. So I think, you can see a little bit of a floor establishing beneath Minnesota, but that said, they still have to make up ground and get in the playoffs. I think, I asked Adrian about it today that, the playoff field is expanded, right? From 7 to 9 teams, right? So getting in the playoffs doesn't mean exactly what it used to in the past. And also once you're there, then you have wild card games on top of it, right? So it can be kind of a crapshoot 8-9 wild card matchup in that first week after decision day. So then you have a quick turnaround, and there's such a benefit in getting on more solid ground and getting into that 6th, 7th, even in 5th place or so, because then you're solidly in the playoffs, and then you have a 3-game series and you're really kind of in the thick of it. So, it's not just getting in the playoffs. I know that that's been brought up a lot, And obviously it's an accomplishment. But when you look at other teams in the East that have done it, they've had a lot longer streaks. You look at teams in the West that just got knocked out, like, Portland and Seattle had made it like 10 years in a row, right? And it won a trophy last year, won CONCACAF Champions League. So, it's a nice accomplishment, but I think there needs to be a grain of salt with it that's not the end goal, right? I talked to Bill McGuire for a Q&A last week, and he said, obviously the goal is more, right? That's what this team wants. It's not just getting in the playoffs, but making noise once they get there.
And I want to ask you about that, because I know you mentioned doing a Q&A with Dr. Bill McGuire, which, he doesn't do a whole lot of interviews, unless asked. He doesn't show up. He doesn't like his presence known too often. He's at every game, but he's not one of those guys that's like out in front. Right. What has been your maybe favorite interview that you've done Minnesota United wise? If people don't know and they haven't it's not a game story per se, like what have you done that you've really enjoyed, or like maybe was like super refreshing or insightful for you?
Yeah. I really enjoyed last year doing a feature on Sean Bigness, right? The assistant equipment manager who's become famous for his ball catching at the end of warmups, right? I think that's a real fun story for me, just because of kind of the fact that he's, the guy behind the guy, right? He's not the star player, and he's not the one that's going to get the praise. He's the one that's folding the laundry and making sure that the proper boots are in the lockers, right? And here he is. He kind of found a way to try to maximize his job and do his job better, and fans have appreciated that. And I think he really enjoys kind of being in that spot. I did a story earlier this year on Songbin Jung when he went to the Korean immersion school, and that was great just to see how engaging Songbin was with those little kids, and kind of helping them with their crafts, or reading a book to them, or listening to kind of musical performances, and kind of the respect and relationship that he has with the Korean culture. And I thought that one was really cool, just because, I see so much soccer and so many things about training and games and locker rooms and injury reports. And this was none of that. This was just, a young guy who's come to Minnesota after having a tough year in Switzerland, that kind of is embraced in St. Paul in this Korean immersion school. I think that probably this year was my favorite story, just because of the offbeat nature of it.
I love that you said that too, because you're spot on. We spend so much time immersed in the actual game activities, practice, training, and what these guys and, staff are on the field and on the technical side of things, that, I think fans love to know these players off the field. They love to see other things that they are involved in, whether it's family or community or otherwise. So I love those kind of stories. I totally appreciated the Bigness story. I'll just never forget, when we were getting on the bus, and I think it was in Portland, and they were waiting for him to come out and get on the bus. And I'm not gonna lie, I think Adrian was just a titch jealous that they didn't want to see. They weren't asking for Inchi. Right. They were asking for Bigness, the ball catcher. So that was pretty awesome. I'm sure that made Biggs feel pretty good, because those guys work incredibly hard. Yeah. And so it's fun to see you shine a little light on them as well. And of course, Songbin in the community, because I just don't think there's always enough of that, not from Minnesota United per se, but just in general, these guys getting out into the community, and I'm really grasping onto some of that stuff. So that's pretty great. So I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you got to run. You've got 1,000 different things in a million different directions going on. And I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure we look forward to all your continuing of writing, the digital aspect and everything else, to see how Minnesota United wraps up this season. So thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that does it for this episode this week of Sound of the Loons. We'll chat to you again next week. We'll see if they get 6 points from the week and where Minnesota United sits in the standings after this. Is this match day 29-30? I don't even know. It's hard to keep track, but I appreciate everybody tuning in next week.